First of all, I bring greetings to you from the Faculty Senate. And on behalf of the Senate, I want to thank the organizers of this workshop for their efforts to assist colleagues in the important process of seeking promotion and tenure. And second, I want to congratulate all of you who are applying for promotion or tenure, or for some of you both, for being at a point in your career when you can reflect positively on your many accomplishments and on your contributions to this university. And I am especially indebted, as we all are, to our colleagues who have taken on the great responsibility of assessing applicants and making sound judgments, which is a commitment of many, many hours and careful thought and consideration. And they will be working on behalf of all of you and on behalf of the institution. I also want to commend the committee for its superb choice of a chair. Dr. David Pettigrew is thoroughly dedicated to clear standards, equitable application of procedures, and respectful treatment of all candidates and committee members. And now just a few thoughts about promotion and tenure. Without an energized and productive faculty, an institution of higher learning could not fulfill its fundamental promise to provide students with an excellent education. Or educational excellence for students cannot exist without academically excellent faculty. Promotion, and what I like to think of as its delightful companion, tenure, are the primary means we have of recognizing academic excellence among the instructional faculty. In fact, and I'm quoting, the fundamental quality to be considered by all who evaluate a candidate for promotion or tenure shall be academic excellence. So our singular criterion for promotion and tenure is excellence. So then there's the question, how do we identify academic excellence? The P&T document says, academic excellence shall be determined by the quality of activity within each of 4 categories of evaluation. And so we have established a means for documenting, reviewing, and assessing quality of activity, which is embodied in the promotion and tenure procedures for faculty developed by the Faculty Senate in agreement with the university president. Because the educational mission of the institution depends so heavily on an academically excellent faculty, the bar for promotion and tenure is high, but reasonable. And the process for applying to be promoted or receive tenure is rigorous, but it is fair and humane. Now, of course, candidates for promotion and tenure should take the process very seriously, but should not find it mysterious, demeaning, or overwhelming. Today's workshop is an attempt to help each of you understand the process and feel comfortable with your role in it. I hope you will approach the composition of your files thoughtfully, optimistically, and with as little conjured stress as possible. So welcome, and I hope this will be a useful workshop for you.
Well, I have to thank Bill for his kind words, and I can only hope to live up to them. I want to welcome everyone today. My thanks to Mike Shea and Linda Cunningham for helping to plan this workshop, and to Mike and Bill for the remarks thus far. As it's fallen to me to fill the position, perform the function of chairperson of the University Promotion and Tenure Committee, I wanted to first recognize those who served on the committee last year and those who continue to serve this year. I want especially to thank Eileen Crawford of the English Department for her leadership as chairperson last year. Eileen was really an exceptional chairperson. And of course, I want to welcome back Doris Marino, who has generously agreed to serve again as our P&T secretary. As well, I welcome back Shirley Jackson, Linda Sampson, Adam Goldberg, Michelle Thompson, and Scott Graves. So it's good to have that continuity, that experience. We're really grateful for the continued commitment. And also welcoming new members, Mary Brown and Joe Fields, who are actually veterans who just had taken a break. So it's good to have them back on the committee for sure. and the really new members, Luisa Pasquelli, Amal Abdel Raouf, and Jacqueline Coates. Were you on the committee before? Yes, I thought so. I guess I'm getting old, getting some of these things, but I remember now. And thank you for your continued service. I wanted to say, Sue. It wasn't in the script, so I try to support myself with the script. But Sue also, an exceptional colleague. I'm so grateful to have her on the committee. Also because of her legal background. Just kidding. Now I'd like to say a few words about our process as determined by shared governance. I would read the introductory statement. Bill already read that. That academic excellence is the criteria for evaluating and recommending full-time members. I guess it's also important to add that academic excellence, as determined by a process of shared governance, is what guides us. And shared governance has decided upon these 4 categories and their weighting. As you know, the categories to which these passages allude are load credit with a weighted value of 10, creative activity with a weighted value of 5, service with a weighted value of 4, and professional attendance and participation with a weighted value of 2. So there's a different order of the categories for counselors and librarians. The same categories in a different order, so the weighted value is the same weighted descending order. So there's load credit for counselors, load credit, professional attendance and participation, service, and creative activity. So for counselors, creative activity would be weighted 2 as opposed to 6 for professors. Librarians have their own order, and then coaches, athletic trainers have their own categories. So you'll prepare your files, as I assume you have already prepared your files for renewal, or perhaps already for tenure and associate professor, if you're now applying for full professor, to represent your work, to tell your story within these 4 categories that have been designated and weighted through the process of shared governance. The Promotion and Tenure Committee evaluates and deliberates concerning the information in your file. It's really a file-oriented process. We don't go outside the file. And if it's, at some point we have a question about the file, we would only ask the candidate that question. I wanted to make 2 overarching points today that reflect on the nature of the process that we're going to be going through together over the next period of time. The first concerns what I would call the transparent nature of the process and the guidelines to which I've alluded. The guidelines are transparent in the sense that they're clearly stated, or to the best of our ability, and described in at least 2 documents. I'm referring to the contract and the University Faculty Senate Promotion and Tenure document. So I really encourage you to read those carefully and ask questions, myself or Mike or Doris or Linda, about those documents. So there's that transparent quality, but I also wanted to emphasize something Mike alluded to, the hermeneutic or interpretive nature of the deliberations and the evaluation, still within the above-mentioned guidelines. There are numerous layers of interpretation that unfold through the deliberations of the Promotion and Tenure Committee with respect to your file. Let me refer to the Faculty Senate Promotion and Tenure document. Quote, in applying the evaluation criterion in each category to candidates in a given rank, each committee member shall have in mind a standard of performance for that rank. Standards of performance shall vary for different ranks. Committee discussions of standards of performance for various ranks need not produce a consensus. Ultimately, each committee member should formulate his or her own standards that, although they may differ from others, shall guide him or her in voting whether to recommend. So there are 15 committee members. So just to put this in an operative context, we deliberate for 3 successive Fridays, beginning January 17th, 24th, and 31st on tenure, associate professor, and professor respectively, beginning at 1 p.m. each day and continuing until deliberations are complete later that evening. At the formal beginning of each evening's deliberations, we begin with a discussion of the meaning of tenure, or whatever we're deliberating on that evening. And everyone who wishes to express their opinions about this do so. But as the document states, there's no consensus that is necessarily achieved. And this, of course, reminds us of the 15 individual voting members on the committee who are elected. Further, in the section of the documents concerning the responsibilities of the DEC chair, the DEC, the chair of the department, and the dean, the expression that's repeated 3 times is as follows. The evaluation shall reflect DEC, the chairperson, and the dean's professional judgment and opinion, as well as factual information. So there are layers of interpretation from the DEC to the chairperson, to the dean, and to the P&T, constituting a careful, deliberative process, a deliberative, interpretive, indeed what I call a hermeneutic process, which involves bringing the meaning, the significance of the file to light. Following the discussion of the meaning of tenure, associate, and professor on each of the successive nights of deliberations, I will ask next, when we get to the first candidate on the list, I'll say, who was at the interview? Then in the case of each and every candidate, on each of the 3 nights, there is a report and discussion on the interview by those who were present at the interview. There have to be at least 3 members of the P&T at each interview. So this is a kind of reminder that when you seal your file on December 16th or 17th, there's both days. It's not that I don't know which day it is. Both days. You'll be given an opportunity to sign up for an interview. The interviews are 20 minutes in length and take place from Friday, January 10th until Thursday, January 16th. They provide an opportunity for you to highlight anything you'd like to highlight in your file in the 4 categories. And you're also free to ask questions about the process, and the P&T committee may also ask you questions at the time. So I really encourage you to avail yourselves of this opportunity for an interview. Following the report on the interview, there's a general discussion of each candidate in the file. So there's a discussion on each category, one by one. And then a scoring of each, one by one. Load credit, creative activity, in the case of teaching faculty, service, and professional attendance and participation. And a scoring on the contractually designated integer scale, 1 to 10 integer scale. In each category, the scores having dropped the lowest and highest scores will be averaged. The average score for the candidate in each category will be multiplied by the weighted value of the category. The scores thus obtained in each category will be added with the scores obtained in each of the other categories and supplemented perhaps finally by a score determined by years in rank. The total number determines, in the case of promotion, particularly your rank relative to other candidates. Now you'll find these details on page 18 and 19 of the Faculty Senate document. However, these numbers and rankings are only an advisory phase in the process. The committee uses the total weighted average to produce initial rankings, but is not obliged to determine the order of candidates by numerical methods. The use of this method shall assist in, but need not determine, the final recommendations, which are determined by the deliberations of the committee. So it's a kind of phase 1. We deliberate, score, and then when the scores are computed and tabulated by the chairperson, they're presented to the committee. When the committee receives the scores, they begin to deliberate again on each candidate in the 4 categories. And now we're in addition to the file and the categories, we have the numbers, and we think about the meaning. Following the deliberation in each of the 4 categories, the committee then votes as to whether to recommend or not recommend the candidate. The vote is done by secret ballot, and a candidate needs to receive 9 yes votes in order to be recommended. So that's described as a supermajority. So there was one time someone was talking. I would say that as long as I've been on the committee, now in my second decade of service on this committee, my fourth year as chair, but over the years, the P&T chairpersons always encouraged, and following the contract, and encouraged a holistic interpretation of the candidate in the four categories. In other words, we don't add additional weight in any category, and which inappropriately to any category. There was one time someone was talking to me and they said, well, the P&T committee has raised the weight of creative activity. So, what do you mean? So it was raised the weight of creative activity. I said, how do you mean that? And they said, well, it's by the ethos of your presence on the committee. And I said, no, that's not true at all. Maybe it was the presence of my ethos, the ethos of my presence. I can't remember exactly how it went. But it was, we follow the contract and we interpret the categories holistically. Now, following the process I've described, there's yet another week, which you might know about. It's a fourth week of deliberations called reconsiderations. Anyone who was not recommended for tenure in his or her penultimate year is automatically reconsidered. Start the process over again in that case. Or any committee member can request that any other candidate be reconsidered, and they are reconsidered. So that offers yet another opportunity for the consideration of the candidate's case. In addition, of course, I need to remind you that our recommendations are only recommendations to the provost. I wouldn't, use the word decision. If I used it accidentally, it wouldn't make any sense. It wouldn't mean anything, because we're only recommending to the provost, who in turn deliberates, meets with the promotion and tenure committee, and that's the decision, as I understand it. And then the committee's letter of its recommendation will reach you by March 5th. Ultimately, the committee's deliberations and interpretations that are required by the process must be based on 3 letters of recommendation from the chair, the DEC, and the dean, the interview, and on the file. Now, due to a new rule, I call it new, but it's been about 5 years, created by the Faculty Senate Rules Committee, Personnel Committee, right? A P&T committee member who happens to be a department colleague of one of the candidates applying for promotion and tenure is not allowed to comment in any way or answer questions of any kind for that colleague during the deliberation. They're not allowed to talk about that file in the room where the files are stored. So you can't apply knowing one of your colleagues is on the committee and expect them to clarify something in your file. Why do I mention that? Well, it's just good advice that for you to make the strongest possible case for your tenure and or promotion in your file. So your mission is to design your file, make your case, tell your story, and then in the interview, draw our attention to your strengths in each category. Hopefully it's apparent by my comments today that your file has to occupy this space between the transparent guidelines and the deliberative, interpretive process, a space of questioning between. It's a space that those who evaluate your file inhabit, a space between guidelines and interpretation. So I'm looking forward to answering questions today, and of course you'll receive answers from many of us to any questions. But before Doris makes her important presentation, which will be followed by comments from Provost Kennedy, I wanted to add just a couple of additional pieces of advice about your preparation for the process. First, as the document says, all candidates shall include in their file a copy of their original letter of appointment and any subsequent modifications. Now, this cannot be a copy of the letter you received at home. It has to be the one that you signed, and sent back in, and it was stamped and received. If you're not sure, all you have to do is go to HR and tell them you're a candidate for promotion and tenure, and they'll make you a copy of that letter that's in your file. if there's any question, hopefully we'll be housed again in Wintergreen this year, so when you come, if there's a question, it's just a short walk. But that's important, and I remember from personal experience when I first applied for tenure, being sent packing to find my letter of appointment when I was much younger. Back in the day, you wouldn't recognize it. Also, please study your letters as you receive them from the DEC chair and dean to be sure that they use the proper language. If you're concerned, please contact me. This is a tough one because maybe you're not tenured, maybe you're a little intimidated, you don't know if it's the right language, so be sure to ask me about it. Because if you arrive at the closing and the language does not conform to what's specified in the document, faculty senate P&T document, then you'll have to have it redone. And this can be difficult during the holidays. It's possible that the DEC has already left the country. It's not, I'm not trying to be funny, just stating the fact. So we need to, now, this appears 3 times in the faculty senate document. I'm looking at page 9, but it repeats itself with the chair, for the DEC, and for the dean. And it says the recommendation shall include a summary using one of the following phrases. And they're in quotes. So these have to be used in the letter and not modified according to the grammatical vagaries of the English language. So that is important. Another point was that if you have any questions about whether there are members on your DEC who are not eligible to be on your DEC, again, you can ask me about that, because sometimes people don't realize they're not eligible to be on the DEC, and they serve, and again, the letters will come to the closing, and they can't be received as such, and we have to find, sometimes a new DEC would have to be constituted. And remember, all candidates need to prepare their candidate information forms, including one in the file and bringing 15 copies to the closing. I can't emphasize this enough, that the candidate information form cannot be a summary. It can't be a shorthand. You can't say, I've got all that information in the file, I'm not going to bother to make it clear in the... It needs to be, CV, curriculum vitae quality, and maybe beyond that. And when we deliberate, we don't have the files in hand. We only have the candidate information forms, our notes from the files, and our notes from the interview. So this is crucial. If you receive reassigned time for something, research reassigned time, or administrative reassigned time, you can't just put at 3 credits. I mean, you can't. We're advising you, right? You need to say what you did, what's going on, what resulted, what are developments. Provide information. Err on the side of verbosity, as you see I'm prone to do. Finally, you're welcome to add new information to your file at the interview, and I have been unable to determine any contractual reason that you cannot add information to your file anytime later in the process. You and I have to go to the room and add it to the file. The only caveat, let me caveat that, as Al Haig once said, that I don't know if anybody's old enough to remember that, but if you add the information after the deliberations or your category, it's unlikely people will see it. I mean, I will report to the committee that I received that information. So you want to try to get that information in, say, by the interview. But I'm still, it's important to say that the door would still be open. And I want to, end on that note that my door is open. I really encourage you to